approved with the goal of restoring at least some degree of democratic accountability to the administrative state. Pacific Legal Foundation attorney Jonathan Wood.
So the Congressional Review Act requires every new rule a bureaucrat wants to impose on you to first be submitted to Congress, where elected representatives have a chance to review it, and if they disapprove of the rule, to take the step of actually voiding it and preventing similar rules from being adopted in the future. Agencies have been extremely spotty in their compliance with the Congressional Review Act. Some agencies have faithfully submitted their rules to Congress to review. Others haven't done a very good job. This is a problem that the White House and Congress have both warned agencies about, including last year there was a hearing in the House about agencies' failure to comply with the Congressional Review Act. This is a really serious problem that the agencies need to get ahead of. I'm
Chris Woodward.
American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
The church has to take the lead in ensuring that men are properly trained for fatherhood. We have an epidemic in which boys are not growing up with their fathers. So as Christian men, we have to stand in the gap and make up the hedge so that our communities are not destroyed. When we see fatherhood as a blessing and not an inconvenience, we will see children as spiritual weapons in our arsenal. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No, I didn't even think I used the term Steele dossier. I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
Whose voice is that you're listening to? It's James Comey. Jim Comey. Not James T. Kirk, but James Comey. Yeah, former director of the FBI. And he was sitting down with old George. I give 75 grand to the Clinton Global Initiative, Stephanopoulos, to have a little chit chat about his new book. Because, you know, he's got a lot of books to sell. He got an advance, and he's got to make sure that he makes that worth his publisher's while. Welcome to the show, everybody. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right, stacyontheright.com, and also at Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. We're here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. AFR.net is where you can find all the fun stuff, radio stuff, and also urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy. That's where the podcasts are located. And we have a jam-packed show for you today. We have two guests. We're going to be speaking with Nan Hayworth of Independent Women's Forum. She's a former congresswoman and a fantastic guest. First time on the program. It's going to be exciting to speak with her. And then our frequent guest who has the President's Podcast. It's Richard Lim. He's an author. He's going to come on and talk to us in an hour or two about news of the day. Lots of stuff going on of consequence in Washington. And it's always wonderful to get to hear from him about that stuff. So right now, what did you hear? Well, you heard that bit of audio, and it's a thing now. Like, everyone's supposed to stop what they're doing and put everything down, pause your live streaming and whatever you're doing on TV or radio. Just everybody pause for one split second and listen to the sound of James Comey rehashing and reliving his last almost 2 years working for what was then the Obama administration, and then his brief time as, a member of the Trump administration as leader of the FBI. What's funny to me about this entire thing is the reactions from around the place. Like, if you look everywhere right now, everybody's on the web, everyone's on social media, everyone's reacting to what they've read so far, whether it's an excerpt or whether they got advanced copies of the book and they're in media. People are having some, it's a bit of surprise. They seem surprised that the book is so catty, that the book is, it's petty nation, if you know what I mean. And people are reacting to that. Brit Hume, not Brit Hume, one of the leaders in media who was commenting on it, termed it a little bit, something we can't say here on good Christian radio, but suffice it to say, catty, but not in the cute way, that the book comes off as someone he's got an axe to grind. And so books like that don't do well. I mean, sure, a book that's chock full of gossip, people will pick that up and buy it. But when we're talking about a book doing well over the long haul, people reading it and saving it on their bookshelf and not kind of relegating it to the dustbin where it ends up in the Goodwill 99-cent books area. When you want to have a book like that, a book of quality, it's not the cattiness that's going to matter. It's the information that's shared, that stands the test of time, that has a historical bent to it, something that's important, something that you're sharing that will be interesting now, but will be just as interesting 10 years from now or 20 years from now or 30 years from now. And for authors that write those kinds of consequential books, those are the books that you save. Those are the books that you recommend to other people. When someone says, what have you read that's been great? You're going to pull that latest Sowell book out and you're going to snap a screen grab or snap a pic of that and, text that over and say, you got to read this. James Comey's book is not going to be one of those books. Now, Elizabeth Harrington of the award-winning Washington Free Beacon was on television, and she was up against a lady named Wendy who comes from the left side of the aisle, and they were talking about the book. And Elizabeth Harrington had some interesting things to say about it. She feels like he's on the personal attack. It's number 3.
This is some serious doubt cast on Loretta Lynch when he refers to this something involving Lynch that he cryptically refers to as a development still unknown to the American public to this day.
Right. It's very cryptic and very dramatic language that Comey likes to use, but it's interesting because Philippe Reines, who was a Clinton aide at the State Department, also involved in the campaign, says this information wasn't secret to the public. It actually was reported in the Washington Post that Comey was duped by a fake email sent by Russian intelligence that accused Loretta Lynch of going easy on Clinton, which is actually pretty believable and probably why Comey believed it himself. But Philippe Reines says that Comey is not revealing this information because he was duped by this fake email, and that would have made him look bad, which is a running theme, I think, you see from the excerpts of this book, that Comey somehow always comes across looking out like the only honest guy in the room, the straight shooter, and it's just kind of laughable because all the scandals of leadership that happen on Comey's watch, always inserting himself into the spotlight, which is what he's doing with this book.
Perhaps it would be laughable if it wasn't the former director of the FBI. He also wrote this, Wendy, in the book. The unverified material would undoubtedly have been used by political opponents to cast serious doubt on the Attorney General's independence in connection with the Clinton investigation. This is giving Republicans a huge opportunity here, don't you think, to go on the offensive against Comey. Ronna McDaniel earlier called this publicity tour by Comey a self-serving attempt to make money and rehabilitate his own image.
And is that not what this is? So, he's served many, many years, a couple decades, in fact, in the public eye. And while wearing the mantle of being a Republican, it's well known that he and his brother are close consiglières of the Clintons, that they spent many, 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 many weekends together with the Clintons in the Clintons' numerous estates around the globe, different vacation spots. The Comey brothers were in business with the Clintons. The brother of Jim Comey had some kind of like a contracting, extraordinaire type of a business that he owned that worked closely with the Clintons. So for all of this talk about James Comey being this huge vaunted Republican and someone hugely respected by Republicans, I have no idea what they're talking about. What I do know is that the guy, he had a penchant for making wildly offensive decisions. So yeah, I'm glad he announced that the investigation had been reopened into Hillary Clinton, but I'm not glad that he decided, even though he knew she had exercised poor judgment and been negligent in her handling of classified information, she still went off without being prosecuted. He's the one who allowed her to be interviewed without being under oath and for it to be informal and held at her house and so many other things. And so, while liberals might want to convince us that somehow James Comey is one of our own and, he's a Republican and he's got so much that the rest of us just need to, he's your guy. He ain't my guy. He's none of my guy. So I'm not willing to accept that. I'm not co-signing that. That's not my thing. He's not our guy. He's not a part of this. Okay. So let's leave that part out of it. So the bigger deal comes in when you look at what he's saying. So he's saying that he spoke to President Trump, but did not tell him that this dossier was paid for by his political opponents. And he's not sure if that was something that should have been shared with the president. I think if the shoe were on the other foot and some information about James Comey had been released or was being used to investigate him, he would want to know if people who opposed him, people who were up against him in an actual fight, that's what an election is, two sides fighting each for the one prize, which is the presidency. And he would have wanted to know that that was something that happened to him, that his opponents were the ones who paid for the information that was then used to get the warrant that was then used to listen into him and step into him without his knowledge. Yeah, he'd want to know that. In fact, any Democrat would want to know that. But they would know that because they're deep state type folks on the inside. They would be on the inside letting them know, you need to know this is coming down the pipe. Right? So it's also a bit of an oddity because like a few months ago, James Comey started a Twitter account, and it was immediately followed by tons of Democrats and people who, NPR types who think, they're just so much better than the rest of us rubes out here in the middle of the country who just expect you to be who you are, to let your word be your bond, to, kind of be an honorable person, own up to your mistakes, work hard, seek justice, all that kind of stuff. James Comey, he's much more palatable to that NPR set. And so he's got this whole, almost like he wants to be everybody's head Boy Scout. Like he wants everybody to think he's just so great. But the problem is the job of FBI director is kind of the antithesis to that. I mean, you don't run around as the FBI director having people think you're great. You're the chief. You're prosecuting it. Not prosecuting. You're investigating crime. You're bringing bad guys to justice. That takes a different persona. And so it's weird that he got to do that job. But the fact that he was doing that job, but he still wants to be everybody's Boy Scout or Eagle Scout, those two things don't mesh well together. And so it does put you back in the mind. Remember when we first learned that he'd created all of those memos about his meetings with President Trump, I was on here on this show laughing and giggling about the fact that he sounded like he was, up on his tiptoes, running super fast with his knees up high, straight back out to his car and sitting in the dark outside the White House, pecking away on his tiny laptop to create a memo. Just met with President Trump. I felt afraid. He struck fear into my heart. I also was confused. This guy's 6'7" tall. He's imposing, he's foreboding. But then when he opens his mouth up and starts talking about how fearful he felt and how it worried him, he was concerned. Titter tatter tittle, tipple tapple, tipple tapple. It kind of puts you in the mindset that he might be a big dude, but that's a paper tiger if there ever was one. So now he's striking back. And I just find it interesting that, first of all, it's going to dominate the news for the next few days. We'll cover it here on this show today. And I think the president is going to actually add flames to the fire by acknowledging it, which he's already done. President Trump has slammed Comey over the new book. He's a leaker and a liar. And it's not about me disagreeing with whether or not that's true. It's about the fact that he's the president of the United States and James Comey is someone that he fired. And so this is one of those, your name will never leave my lips again type of things. You know how it is. Sometimes you get mad and you're like, I got to work on this. Lord, help me forgive. And other times you're like, I've forgiven and I've moved on. We don't interact again. That's where the president should be with James Comey. And because there was so much blowback for the firing, which I felt was justified, but it was enough to get James T. Comey. Remember, he's the same guy who said in the middle of the night, I don't like the way I'm being treated, but I know if I could just get this information over to my friend at Columbia Law, he has connections at the Washington Times, or the Washington Post, he'll get this story out. I'm going to leak this to him and we're going to get a special prosecutor. And lo and behold, exactly what he laid up in the middle of the night thinking in his bed, while he was tapping on his little mini laptop in the dark. It worked. That worked out great for him. The question for me, sometimes I think about this with the long view, is how does James Comey look in the harsh light of history when, a few years have gone by, or maybe 8 to 10 years have gone by, and people look back at this time? Everyone thinks, especially those on the left, they think, oh, Donald Trump's going to look really, really bad. I don't think so. I think he's going to look like the flawed individual that so many of our presidents have been. But I think James Comey is going to look especially bad because he hasn't behaved he hasn't been manly. His handshake hasn't been tough. He hasn't had any spine. He hasn't had any steel in his spine. He doesn't have the backbone, the grit, the wherewithal. Yeah, he fights dirty. He kicks sand, but he doesn't have the ability to withstand the scrutiny that will be upon him, especially with this book, for his actions, his dereliction of duty in properly investigating and turning over information against Hillary Clinton, and the double standard type of, countenance that he's maintained, that President Trump is just this horrible, scary guy. He's never been afraid of Hillary Clinton, though. He's never been afraid of Bill Clinton, though. I'm not buying it. And no years have passed by. So, there it is. We'll have another little bit of audio on that later in the show, like hour 2. But right now, we're going to go to the break. We have important messages for you, so stay tuned. And we're going to have former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth of Independent Women's Forum. She's going to be our guest right after this, so keep it here.
Hi, this is Kirk Cameron, and I am honored to be partnering with the Ministry of Preborn and American Family Radio to help moms choose life.
Actor Kirk Cameron supports Preborn.
My 4 oldest children were adopted. That is because of caring and compassionate people who help those young mothers choose life. My wife is an adopted child, and her birth mother chose life for her. If it weren't for those caring individuals that help those young moms value the sacredness of life, I wouldn't have my wife, I wouldn't have my 4 adopted children, and the 2 natural-born children that we have wouldn't exist either. My whole family is here because of people that are involved with ministries like Preborn.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. On any given team, there are stronger players who, frankly, carry most of the weight, and they're the primary reason the team wins. But when the team wins, the entire team, including the weaker, less productive players, enjoy the rewards of victory. In 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 22 through 24, David and his mighty men had been out in battle. They came home only to discover that the Amalekites had raided their camp. The Lord told David and his men, "Go get your families and possessions." Some of them were not strong enough to go along with the other guys. So we'll pick up in verse 22. Then all the wicked and worthless men among those who went with David answered and said, "We will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart." Then David said, "You must not do so, my brothers. With what the Lord has given to us, who has kept us and delivered into our hand the band that came against us? And who will listen to you in this matter? For as his share is who goes down to the battle, and so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike." So how should you handle success and victory? Number 1, don't be punitive or selfish. Others may not have contributed as much as you thought they should have, but be magnanimous. Number 2, God gave you the victory. Remember, you're not the star player, God is. Then thirdly, acknowledge and honor the contribution of every person, even if it's limited. Here's what I want you to remember today. Don't hoard the spotlight. God grants victory, give him glory, value and honor the entire team.
Thanks, Crawford, and thank you for listening to today's Legacy Moment, a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hey, hey, hey. What's up, you guys? I'm so glad to be back with you on this happy Friday. Weekend is upon us, and we have wonderful guests on the show today. Really exciting to have, for the first time on the program, former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth. She's a board member for Independent Women's Forum, which is an organization that we here at the show love and enjoy a great deal. Thank you so much for coming on, Congresswoman.
A privilege to join you, Stacey, and thank you for your service.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for thanks for thanking me.
I have very just really honored to join you. Thank you for being such a voice for us.
Well, you know, it's fun to be a voice. Sometimes it can get a little tedious when the leftists are hitting pretty hard, but for the most part, I take it to be a special privilege just because it's a lot easier than working in Congress, because every time I think I'm having it tough, I can open up the news and see what you guys go through.
I'll tell you. Well, Stacey, you're so right. It can be, having had the privilege of serving in Congress, and when we're in Congress, and I'm from a swing district, we are elected to represent the views and wishes of our constituents. I have a set of principles that I always seek to honor. Given the thoroughly invasive role of the federal government in our lives, it can be awfully challenging to advance fiscal conservative principles, especially, to have a less invasive, less confiscatory government, when so many of one's constituents perceive that they depend on these programs. So it's nice to be able, now that I'm outside that world, to speak more forcefully about certain things.
And I'm glad about that. One of the things that's really wonderful and that I've noticed about service to the Congress is that afterwards you often get to really dig into the issues and work on things that you just couldn't do while you were there in D.C. And Independent Women's Forum is a leader on that. You guys are cutting edge on not just issues that impact women, because women's issues are the same issues their husbands face and their family issues. And so it's really, it's the whole group of Americans that are concerned with less government, more freedom, spending more of your money. What do you feel like, because I know that the latest announcement this week was the welfare reform initiative that the president and his administration want to push forward. Where is Independent Women's Forum on that? I know we're supporting it at Project 21. Where are you guys?
Absolutely. No, we definitely aim toward and make policy recommendations that a whole body of work that aims to liberate women to make their own choices in life, not to depend on the federal government. And every way in which we can encourage the kind of behavior, the ways of living our lives that take us away from depending on the government, we're all for it. Anything that increases hiring, that increases the opportunities for entrepreneurs, we're for that. So we've advocated for tax reform, for regulatory relief. We've advocated on behalf of an alternative to family leave programs that are paid for, proposals that are paid for by additional taxes, by proposing that people be free to access their Social Security accounts earlier than the age of retirement, so that they can access those funds, which are their funds, and have more control over them. It's all about giving us more choices, more control. And Stacey, that's what you embody. It's the dignity of realizing the potential within us as citizens, as individuals, and of course as Americans.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%, Congresswoman. In fact, what's funny to me is when I was reading through it. So, you get the press release and then you get something from the White House and you're kind of reading through. And as I was reading through, the first thing he does is he opens up with these 9 principles. And within those principles it's first of all, bringing dignity and respect back to work. So instead of criminalizing work or demonizing it by saying, if you work too much, then we're going to take something away from you. What they're saying is we need to help you get on your feet, but we need everyone to respect work. And if you're able-bodied, you need to be working. And he talks about the strength of families and how we need to really get back to supporting families.
It is so important, and it's unfortunately it's true. The best meant initiatives. Let's assume that these programs have not been put in place in order to render people dependent, but to try to realize the goals of a society of compassionate people. Let's assume that they're all well intentioned, but unfortunately, as we all know, they have the effect of encouraging or rewarding behaviors that do contribute to the disintegration of families. And so many folks who have lived in disadvantaged communities, regardless of where those communities are or what their ethnic composition is, will tell you that the first thing children need is a family that is as intact as possible. And in reforming these programs, if we can remove disincentives that are toxic, that's a great thing for us.
It is, and I think one of the maybe we don't do this as well as we could as Republicans, the GOP, when we've implemented something and it's helped, then possibly we could follow up on that and do some human interest pieces to show how welfare reform has not been something that was meant to penalize people or to harm them, but has rather offered them the opportunity to empower themselves and take a real foothold on the American dream. And I'm hoping that we're going to see the RNC and some of our forward-facing organizations do some things like that, because we already have the tax reform that people are really still just getting into. And then we have now on the horizon this welfare reform package. So I mentioned earlier, Congresswoman, about James Comey writing a book, and now he's out hawking it and peddling it. And apparently the early, inclinations are that the book makes him seem a little petty and, not as it's not going off as well as he thought it might have. What are your thoughts on how, so he's back in the news, he's dominating the news cycle again, and really we have other things to talk about.
He is, and Stacey, please call me Nan, by the way.
Oh,
and
thank you
for the honor of that title. But Nan is fine. And Mr. Comey, look, we all saw it. We saw his behavior in 2016 and the seizing of the spotlight in contradictory ways. Just everything he did, starting with that famous press conference in which he essentially, read out kind of, I think most of us consider an indictment of Hillary Clinton. And somehow it was sort of like, even so, right? Even so, I'm taking Loretta Lynch off the hook, right? And then, of course, October 28th, he comes out with this, and I kind of thought, at the time, I wonder if he is somehow trying to compensate for what he did in the summer, which everybody with any common sense thought was somehow just not quite the right thing to do. So it resonates with those who have talked about his behavior earlier in his career, in earlier years, in which he was someone who seemed to be all too eager to draw attention to himself, to be self-aggrandizing. And his behavior, unfortunately, within the FBI, which, of course, is a body that we all respect. And I have a dear friend who is an FBI special agent who is just an incredible patriot and also a veteran. So you hate to see anyone with this degree of prominence somehow reflect that badly on the FBI. And I think he is being seen as someone who is saying, hey, this is Jim Comey. This isn't the FBI. This is Mr. Comey with all his faults.
Well, my father works with FBI agents in the course of what he does for a living. And so I've had the privilege of, with my husband and the kids, and before my husband and I were married, 6 times we've had the special agent tour of the White House. And so you get to take the tour. It's given to you by an FBI agent. And I tell you, it's one of the most interesting times every time we get the privilege to do it, it is just, there's no way to describe what it's like to have someone who's an FBI agent walk you through the White House and give you their perspective on what you're seeing and tell you the little secrets and tidbits that the docents just don't give when you take the regular public tour.
Right.
And one of the things that's happened every time is one of the kids will say, well, what about this? Or you're an FBI agent. What about that? And they're always so professional and kind and so insightful.
Yeah.
And it's just been inspiring. And those are just, 6 brief interactions, Nan, that I've had. And so I can't imagine what it's like to know someone personally and really get to interact with them and hear from them. And so my respect for FBI agents and the people who work for that agency remains. But I do think that there's some corruption there, specifically from agents Strzok and, the other one, Page, and Comey, and a few others. And they're marring the good name of others who really do such a great job, the nameless agents who never get to be famous.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And that's why the Inspector General's work is so important. Michael Horowitz, he has just this afternoon, as you know, his first report on Andrew McCabe has been released, in which he verifies that Andrew McCabe showed a lack of candor, which again is that is something that is the failing of an individual that must be addressed. It has been addressed in certain ways, but cannot be allowed to taint our respect for an entire organization of people who are dedicated patriots and public servants.
So we know, Nan, that, Mueller can't investigate the president for the rest of his term. It has to come to a head at some point. And I do believe after the investigation, well, I mean, I guess I can always keep hope alive. After that investigation is complete, right, we can then kind of move on from this adversarial relationship that exists right now. And I'm really hoping that that's soon, because we want to get back to regular business as much as we can. But where do you see this happening? Like, where do you see things going with this latest raid on Cohen's offices and the kind of the breaking of attorney-client privilege?
Right. Well, it's certainly what I know of it, which is merely what's been in the press, is that it has nothing, as far as I can tell, directly to do with the, thus far, as we all know, essentially fruitless investigation of so-called collusion. There is no evidence of collusion. This is the fantasy, as we all know, of folks, not all of whom are Democrats, as we also know, who have never accepted that President Trump is indeed our president, who was, elected entirely legitimately. And it is Alan Dershowitz, as you know, I think has made really the most striking commentary about all of these events, and I am inclined to agree with him that this is way out of control, and it's not serving our nation with any honor. And I don't like any of the way this is going. I don't think it's not going to lead to justice. It's not. And we need to support a president who's doing so many amazing things for the good of this country. It's terrible to see the muscle being used, the force trying to be used to intimidate. I mean, it really is, an example of how government can be used as a weapon against us.
Nan, I have to second that, and even I would encourage the president, to hold his ground, not be goaded into firing Mueller, not to feel the need to respond to everything, even though his online reach is so it's fantastic, and I think it's one of the best things. It's one of the best tools he has. I would encourage him to hold his fire, occasionally to give. Because the worst thing your enemies can see is a cool, calm, collected, potential victim, and that's the way they see the president. They want it. They want his scalp. So yeah, I would say that.
You know that from being in public life. I know that from having been in politics. And the other aspect of it is, and you bring up an excellent point, the president really has uniquely reached out to the public and to an entire nation, all of whom are now his constituents, beyond the reach of the press. And I know from having, I was always happy to talk with folks, many of whom didn't necessarily support my policy philosophy, but it's amazing, Stacey, and we see it all the time. You can have a great interview with a journalist, and I'm a doctor by profession, so we're trained to take in all the evidence. So gather all the evidence and let's come up with a unifying conclusion and a plan of action. And what a journalist is capable of doing, unfortunately, is pulling out the one word or the one phrase that they want to emphasize, even if it's beside the point or not the main issue at all, and doesn't even necessarily represent how someone thinks. So I am, and I've seen that happen, and it does distort and it does misinform, and it is a problem for our public. So yes, the president should. Bravo for communicating directly with the American people, and I agree with you. I think he's got a remarkable policy agenda, great achievements, and I would love very much to see him emphasize those every single day, because he can do that from now until 7 years from now, and he'll never run out of good things to say.
I agree. I really do. And it's been such a pleasure to speak with you, Nan. Thank you for coming on, and have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk again soon.
A privilege. I would welcome that, and thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth. She is a board member for Independent Women's Forum, one of our favorite organizations. I think it's IWF.org. Head on over there, hit the subscribe button. We'll be back with more right after this.
Part of growing in Christ is learning how to encourage others. In doing so, you always gain strength for your own journey. It's kind of like you can't pray for someone in earnest and remain angry at them. You may not like what they've done, but the presence of God has a way of sifting the wrath right out of you. You can't encourage someone else in your walk and remain numb to the encouraging words yourself. As you encourage others, you begin to see that all things are possible in Christ Jesus. Your obstacles become visibly obtainable. In this world of self-centeredness and all about me, be extraordinary. Don't be the norm. Each day, stop and take a me poll to determine just where you are in your walk with the Lord. Encourage your brother or sister in the Lord in that area and watch God do some amazing things in your life. Your deliverance is resting in the power of your tongue. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Listen to Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacey on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Target continues to allow men into their women's restroom and changing areas. Will 2018 be the year Target reverses this dangerous and reckless policy? Protect your family. Don't shop at Target. Sign the boycott pledge at afa.net. The American Family Association will continue to work toward the goal of convincing Target to reverse its misguided policy that places women and children at risk. Sign the boycott pledge at afa.net. That's afa.net.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness. And may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical foundations.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Judge Russell, do you have personal feelings on abortion?
I have certainly considered the issue over the years as...
Notwithstanding those feelings, are you willing to follow United States Supreme Court precedent?
Absolutely. My personal feelings have no business in the courtroom, and that's what I've tried to live in my time as a state court judge.
Okay. Judge Summerhays, do you have personal feelings about abortion?
I will echo with my fellow nominee. It is an issue that I have thought about, that my personal viewpoint is irrelevant. I have a very long record on the bench, and I have always applied precedent or where there wasn't precedent directly on point. I analyzed free and clear of my personal preferences.
Okay. Professor, same question. Do you have personal feelings about abortion?
Senator, I've certainly thought about the issue.
I'm sorry?
I've certainly thought about the issue, Senator.
We'll let Mike a little closer.
Sorry. Yes, I've certainly thought about the issue, but I would then repeat what my fellow nominees have said, which is that those views can't and won't affect how cases are decided if confirmed.
So notwithstanding your feelings, your personal feelings about abortion, as a United States District Court judge, you're going to follow the Supreme Court precedent?
Yes, Senator.
What you're saying? Ms. Vitter, do you have personal feelings about abortion?
Yes, Senator.
Notwithstanding those feelings, do you intend to follow United States Supreme Court precedent as a federal district court judge?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, so what were we just listening to there? Well, you've got the Trump judicial nominees. They're all up in front of the Judiciary Committee, and you heard one of the senators on that committee asking them all in turn whether or not they would abide by the Supreme Court law of the land, which is Roe v. Wade, enshrining a constitutional right for a woman to terminate a pregnancy, and asking them each if they would abide by that. Now, it's interesting because if you watch the whole clip, and it's 32 minutes long, and I spent time watching it yesterday, and I watched it because over at Law and Crime, which is a Dan Abrams production, you get there from Mediaite.com, they have this piece up that I had to watch because the title, it's clickbait. The title is Watch Trump Judicial Nominee Squirm When Asked Whether She Opposes Racial Segregation. Now, that's not exactly accurate. First of all, we're talking about who's this person that everyone's up in arms about. And by everyone, I mean leftists. I mean up in arms. They've got their snowflake jackets on. They don't want this woman confirmed because she's pro-life. Her name's Wendy Vitter. She's general counsel to the Catholic Archdiocese of New Orleans, and her husband is former Louisiana Senator David Vitter. Now, during her time as David Vitter's wife, as opposed to, working as a judge, she was often found herself at pro-life events, meetings, etc., and she would, moderate panels. And some of the people on the panels espoused views that, even I'm staunchly pro-life. You all know this, but some of the things they said, things about birth control, stuff like that those are debatable subjects. We can all agree that a life is started at conception and is terminated by abortion. But some of the things that are alleged to be side effects of abortion and unintended consequences are up for debate. And so what she did was when she was on the panel, at the end of the panel, she encouraged everyone in the room to take the resources offered by the panelists and to check with their physicians for the veracity of the information that was presented. That's not bad. I mean, some moderators won't even do that. They moderate the panel. They don't really make their own personal feelings known, and they don't offer one way or the other any encouragement on what you just heard. They expect you to make your own analysis and come to your own opinion. And so during this hearing, she was asked by Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat, Connecticut, do you believe that Brown v. Board of Education was correctly decided? And she said, I don't mean to be coy, but I think I get into difficult areas when I start commenting on Supreme Court decisions which are correctly decided and which I may disagree with. Again, my personal political or religious views I would set aside. That is Supreme Court precedent. It's binding. If I were honored to be confirmed, I would be bound by it. Of course, I would uphold it. Now, that is not the same as her saying, I disagree with the desegregation of the South or the desegregation of K through 12 education. That is not what she said. Now, to understand why she answered that way, you need only listen to or watch the YouTube video on the link, and you'll see that the reason why she was asked this is because it's a trap. It is a trap. Because would it matter if she disagreed with desegregation or Brown v. Board of Education? Are you telling me, Senator Blumenthal, that this woman and in a circuit judge position would be able to resegregate schools within the jurisdiction covered by that circuit court? Is there any chance in America that this one single judge at the circuit court level could resegregate an entire area of the United States educationally? Could that happen? I don't think so. So the point to this question is that they wanted a soundbite, and she gave it to them because she answered as they knew she would. Others who were on this same confirmation hearing in the panel, others answered the question the same way. When asked about different parts of the Constitution and whether or not they agreed with Supreme Court rulings, they said that they didn't have a judge opinion. In other words, at work, they don't have opinions on whether or not the Supreme Court is right or wrong. They just are there to adjudicate cases based on precedent, some of which comes from the Supreme Court of the United States. That's it. So she seemed a bit wishy-washy, and I think it's because she was trying to figure out why they were asking her this, and she was trying to answer within the parameters of what the confirmation hearing is about. So if you come off too strong on one side or the other, and if you don't agree that as a judge, you have to set aside your personal feelings and use court precedents to make rulings, then obviously you will not be confirmed. Now, never mind the fact that the Democrats are the ones who have made judicial activism a thing. It's the Democrats who have their judges on benches creating new law, creating new constitutional rights, talking about the Constitution being a document that is living and breathing. These same individuals are the ones who are now putting the screws to this candidate because she's a conservative, because she's pro-life. So one of the other senators went through the same routine, but this time he was asking about the morality of, I believe it was the Second Amendment, and he asked them all that. But I want to point out that she did clearly state that segregation in public facilities like education arena, whatever, that it's bad social policy and it's immoral. But a Dan Abrams production called Law and Crime still put the clickbait headline up there that this woman, this judge, Wendy Vitter, is somehow supportive of segregation. So let's listen to the answer that she finally ends up giving when the question is posed to her in a way that does not jeopardize her confirmation. It's number 2.
Judge Brassel, you've thought about the Second Amendment, I bet. Do you have personal feelings about the parameters of the Second Amendment?
I have certainly thought about it. I don't know that I have personal feelings about the parameters of the Second Amendment.
Okay. Well, notwithstanding those thoughts, do you intend to follow precedent of the United States Supreme Court?
Absolutely, in the Eighth Circuit as well.
Okay. Judge Summerhays, you thought about the Second Amendment?
I have thought about the Second Amendment, and I will follow precedent.
Okay. Notwithstanding your personal beliefs?
Notwithstanding my personal preferences.
Okay. Professor?
Yes, Senator, I have thought about the Second Amendment, and notwithstanding my personal beliefs, I would apply faithfully precedent of the Supreme Court and the United States Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit.
Ms. Vitter, have you thought about the Second Amendment?
Yes, Senator.
Notwithstanding your thoughts or feelings, do you intend to follow United States Supreme Court precedent?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, I got one more for you. I understand the reluctance for you to comment on precedent. So I want to put it another way. I'll start with Judge Brassel. Do you believe that having schools segregated by race, even if they are equal in terms of instruction, is a good social policy?
It simply is not my role here to comment on social policy. The United States Supreme Court has told me that...
I'm not asking you about precedent.
I understand.
I'm just asking you, do you believe separate but equal is good policy for our schools?
I do not believe that it is good policy for our schools.
Thank you, ma'am. Judge Summer Hayes?
I would echo that. I do not believe it's good policy. I mean, there are certain historical moments in our country, and I will get back to precedent. The Supreme Court has very clearly agreed that.
I'm not asking about precedent.
I understand.
I'm just asking you.
I agree that it is bad social policy.
Professor, you believe that separate but equal in terms of our schools is a good social policy?
No, Senator.
Okay. Again, I'm not asking about precedent. I just want to know about what you think about the social policy of having schools, Ms. Vitter, segregated by race, even if they're equal. Can we agree that that's immoral?
Yes.
Okay. Shoot, I'm done.
He said, I'm done. In other words, when the question is posed in a way that doesn't jeopardize the confirmation, they're all able to answer. All of them are able to say that they don't think separate but equal facilities are moral or good public policy. And that is the question that the Democrat could have asked and gotten an answer straight out of the bat. But instead, he posed it in a way that would jeopardize her ability to be confirmed, because she would have then commented on ruling by the Supreme Court. She would have given her personal opinion during a confirmation hearing that would have jeopardized her ability to be confirmed. And that's all they want. They want to trick you, trap you, stumble you into doing something that will jeopardize your confirmation. Meanwhile, if they can't get you to do that, if they can't get you to, with your own mouth, make the mistake, they'll just make it up and put it on a big, huge website like Law and Crime. So I'm covering it here on the show. First of all, because what poor form that is. You know, if you want to fight, then go over and pick a fight. But don't pick a fight and you're unable to get the result that you want and then go behind someone's back and beat them up verbally online. That isn't right. But there is no honor. There's no honor in politics. That much is so patently clear. So, I saw that. I'm like, wow, you would think if she, maybe they would have liked her if she'd said, well, I used to be pro-life, but I'm just not so sure about it anymore. But instead, over and over and over again during the hearing, Kamala Harris and others, they're all just asking her the same questions over and over and over again. Do you believe women have the right to choose? Do you believe that women have are more likely to be promiscuous if they take birth control? They just picked stuff out of any place where she was ever present that someone else said something, and they asked her if she believed it. That's the same as if you happen to be at the library and there's some radical communist speaking there about their latest book, and then I bring you on the show and say, so you were at the library that day? And you're like, yeah, I was checking out books. So do you believe in communism? And you'd be like, well, wait, did I ever say I believe in communism? That's not a good answer. You need to say yes or no. Yes or no, do you believe in communism? You might not believe in it, but why should you have to defend yourself? Why should you have to deny it as if to basically give validation to the accusation? See, she was smarter than that. She wasn't going to get sucked into that. Basically denying the same thing that's happened with President Trump and this whole, do you disavow racism? I mean, yeah, he has actually. I feel like he shouldn't have. I feel like he should have said, no, I'm not going to disavow it. Check YouTube, check Google, check Bing, check DuckDuckGo. All the pictures of me sitting around with, Rosa Parks when she was alive, and Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. All the checks, the pictures of me giving checks to Black organizations. I don't need to disavow anything. No, I'm not going to disavow it. How about you disavow? Do you kick puppies? Do you beat your wife? if we're going to talk about people disavowing, why don't you start? You disavow all the things you think people might think you're guilty of, and then I'll go. You know, this is how we have to play with these people. You have to cut up rough because they just won't be on the up and up. And it's fine to oppose a judicial nominee. I am not expecting people to come up, well, you know, I got to support this person because there's no reason for anyone to support anyone. You do whatever you feel is best. But when you come to these hearings and you start with this kind of foolishness, it makes me wonder why you're there. You don't deserve to be there asking these kinds of silly questions. It's a confirmation hearing for a judgeship on a circuit court. That should be important enough for these elected officials to treat this seriously. But that's not what they did. So I called them out. All right, that's hour one. We'll be back with more Stacey on the Right after these messages.
Secular progressives in the United States have worked to alter the very nature of our republic.
For the progressives, there are no longer any God-given natural rights.
AFA Executive Vice President Ed Vitagliano helps you understand the progressive threat to the American Republic. Get your copy of this powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. President Trump isn't happy about former FBI Director James Comey releasing a book, John Decker reports.
The president taking to Twitter to fire back at his fired FBI director, writing James Comey is a proven leaker and liar. Virtually everyone in Washington thought he should be fired for the terrible job he did until he was, in fact, fired. He continued he leaked classified information for which he should be prosecuted. The president upset at comments Comey makes in his new book out next week, in which he writes the president is unethical and untethered to truth and institutional values. His leadership, Comey writes, is transactional, ego-driven, and about personal loyalty. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
A pro-Israel activist is praising Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for standing strong against Iran and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Chad Groening has more.
During a Holocaust Remembrance speech Wednesday, Netanyahu sent a message to the regime in Tehran, quote, "Don't test the state of Israel's determination." He also responded to a statement from the Kremlin, in which Putin, quote, stressed it was fundamentally important to respect Syria's sovereignty and urged to refrain from any moves that further destabilize the situation in that country and pose a threat to its security. Netanyahu reiterated to Putin that Israel would not allow the entrenchment of Iran's military in Syria. Lori Cardozo-Moore is president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. She says he makes more sense than anybody else on this issue.
Netanyahu mentioned the fact that looking back at what happened during the Holocaust, the world leaders refused to intervene because they wanted to do what was politically expedient for them at the time. Trying to avoid war with the Nazis ended up costing not just 6 million Jews their lives, but another 5.5 million other people.
Cardozo-Moore says Netanyahu knows about the lessons of history.
Bibi Netanyahu has made a sobering statement to the world leaders. The world must wake up. We all know that if we do not study the mistakes of the past, we will be doomed to repeat them.
I'm Chad Groening.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott says more than half of the National Guard members the state wants at the border are now on the job.
At a National Guard armory in the Texas border city of Weslaco, Governor Abbott says the morale of the troops
is very high
in the fight against illegal immigration and drug trafficking. And while immigration advocates have criticized the move, Abbott says in the Rio Grande Valley alone, apprehensions have spiked to 450 illegals a day.
The president was right to call for this action now,
before the situation got out of hand. 762 National Guard troops out of some 1,400 being sent from Texas are now on the border. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
An abortion industry watchdog is looking for ways to convince Ohio to take action against a problem abortion clinic.
March 17th, an ambulance was called a preterm abortuary in Cleveland to transport a woman to a hospital emergency room for treatment. Operation Rescue Cheryl Sullinger obtained 911 records which indicate the woman was bleeding heavily and clinic staff could not stop it. But that's not the only injury on record.
We've documented at least a dozen such incidents in the last few years, including the death of one abortion patient, Lakeisha Wilson, who died in 2014.
The surgery is done on the 4th floor at preterm, and when the elevator is not working or being repaired, patients needing transport to hospitals for injuries must be carried down 4 flights of stairs to the ambulance.
All through this entire process that we've gone through with this abortion clinic of reporting these incidents, multiple injuries to women, we've never been able to get the Department of Health or the medical board in Ohio to actually take any action.
Operation Rescue is not sure why that is the case, considering the fact that the state has done an excellent job of citing or shutting down abortion clinics that can't maintain minimum safety and health standards. I'm Charlie Butler.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show.
Personal here. After saying that he's unethical, untethered to the truth, he writes, he calls his leadership of the country ego-driven and about personal loyalty. But he really goes into some really odd personal attacks on the president, describing the president as shorter than he expected, with a too long tie and bright white half moons under his eyes that he suggests came from tanning goggles.
Right. Whatever happened to when they go low, we go high? Comey's getting down in the dirt with Trump, and he's, pretending that, or claiming that he's visiting the tanning bed, and he's saying, oh, I had to make a mental note of the size of his hands. I mean, who's scooping down low at this point? Who's making, I thought he was above all of this, behavior that we've heard so much from the left and pundits criticizing Trump for. I mean, Comey's doing it himself. I think that at the end of the day, the reason why Comey is doing this book is because he's ready for his close-up, which has been his MO his entire career. It's why he inserted himself into the Hillary Clinton investigation, making that unusual public statement. It's why he rushed to the bedside of John Ashcroft hospital bed during the Bush administration to paint himself as a straight shooter, a lifelong Republican, but he was willing to go to task with the Bush administration over a surveillance program, ironically, that his FBI used to spy on Carter Page. So it really, Comey's book, it's all about looking out for number one and serving himself.
Wow. So, okay, welcome back to the program. Head over to stacyontheright.com and urbanfamilytalk.com and the websites. And that was Elizabeth Harrington kind of completing her analysis of what she knows about James Comey's new book and some of his comments that he's made publicly as he promotes that book. So what could we be talking about instead of James Comey? Well, you know me, I found something that's actually super important, something that is of value for Americans to know, and it actually undergirds some of the statements that have been made by President Trump, where he's actually come forward and he said, look, the Chinese are cheating us. They're stealing from us. They're doing things that we've got to put a stop to. And as long as we allow them to do these things, they're actually harming our GDP. They're harming our American businesses. And as president, I'm not going to put up with that. Well, what's he talking about? Well, it's easy to find. The Chinese spies have engaged in massive theft of U.S. technology. Now, we've talked here on the program about how that technology has been stolen in the process of, an American company going to China and negotiating the opening of a factory and, getting workers to staff the factory, et cetera, they often will say, we need, access to intellectual property, or we need you to share technology with us. But that's not the only way they go about stealing American tech. Now, first off, President Obama actually made this situation worse. He weakened counterintelligence against foreign spies. So China is engaged in large-scale theft of American research and technology from universities, using spies, students, and researchers as their collection agents. Now, experts were testifying before Congress on Wednesday, and they spoke of compounding the technology theft because the administration of President Obama weakened the counterintelligence efforts against foreign spies. Now, what's important about that? Well, the president at that point, President Obama, curbed national level counter-spy efforts, and it basically just, it's like waving a white flag or waving a red flag in front of a bull. Come get it. And so that's what they did. Michelle Van Cleve is a former national counterintelligence executive, and she said shortly after the creation of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in 2004 that a national counter-spy program against foreign spies was restricted during the administration of President Bush. Also, he's guilty too. Unfortunately, the backsliding continued under President Obama. So Van Cleve was actually testifying before two subcommittees, the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and she was talking about a directive issued by DNI James Clapper back in 2013. So that is still in force, and it reduces the National Counterintelligence Program Authority by directing all counter-spy programs to be run by individual departments or agencies. So, we're basically talking about the elimination of dedicated strategic counterintelligence programming. Elite pockets of proactive capabilities just simply died from neglect. This is not a national level effort. Basically, they reduced the entire situation, the entire operation down to caretaker duties like taking inventory and writing reports. This is what I'm talking about. So when everybody's talking about Jim Comey, you best believe there's some real news. There's this, and then there's the story about Backpage. So you guys have possibly heard about that. Backpage.com. There's this website called Backpage, right? And the people who run it, specifically the CEO of Backpage, has pled guilty, and they're shutting the website down permanently. Now, if you don't know what it is, you might be like me. You've heard the name, but you've never been to the website. You're not exactly sure what it is. It's something people go to, but you're not sure for what. Well, it's a classified ads website. The CEO pled guilty yesterday to conspiracy, money laundering, and facilitating prostitution. Backpage.com was basically a glorified sex trafficking website. And Carl Ferrer, who's the CEO, will face up to 5 years in prison. His plea agreement requires that he permanently shut the website down immediately, as well as offer technical assistance to the U.S. government to effectively do so. He's 57 years old, and he admitted that he had long been aware that the great majority of Backpage.com's escort and adult advertisements were, in fact, advertisements for prostitution services. Now, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton issued a statement saying that the company has also pled guilty to human trafficking in the state of Texas. FBI seized Backpage.com on April 6th, which was a fantastic move that was commended by Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Now, why is this so important specifically, especially for us in the Christian, this is a Christian radio show? Because we've been talking about sex trafficking, the trafficking of human beings, specifically girls, most of them minors, little boys, sold into sexual slavery, and then it's happening right here in America. And Backpage.com was a central aspect of that. And now, how does this connect up with the Trump administration and the reason why everybody would rather pay attention to James Comey's garbage book because it is so much more funner to talk about James Comey's book and to make a whole bunch of pronouncements about how James Comey, he's the man, he's taken down Trump, look at him hitting Trump, than it is to admit that President Trump has done a whole lot to stop sex trafficking in America, busting sex trafficking rings that were run by MS-13, deporting people who are guilty of sex trafficking, getting rid of websites and other vehicles that facilitate sexual slavery, and now the takedown of Backpage.com. This is fantastic news. There are people out there, women and girls, who they're literally held against their own will and made to work this way. And so, why don't we let the left talk about Stormy Daniels, and we'll talk about how wonderful it is to know that these people can no longer use this service to sell young women and girls and little boys. So the Sex Workers Outreach Project issued a statement noting that services like Backpage provide sex workers with a place to freely discuss potentially dangerous clients, establish boundaries with clients ahead of time, and protect them from police abuse and violence. The seizure of Backpage is another example of state-sanctioned violence against the sex work community and their families. To do this in the name of anti-trafficking is absurd, as this drives trafficking further underground and makes it more difficult to access the most marginalized members of any group of people, whether they be exploited or not. So, in other words, leave the site up. We want these people to be trafficked because at least then we know where they are. If that's not some flawed reasoning, it's not Friday. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So, of course, this article's up over at Gizmodo by Melanie Aaron Krantz, and she ends the piece with that. Come on. I don't even want to hear it. Sex Workers Outreach Project. Okay. Are you talking about freeing these women from sex work, or are you talking about validating it and acting like it's just another way to be? No one should be forced to endure prostitution just because it's been validated and made to seem like it's something viable in a relationship type of a thing. And so this is the distraction tactic. This is who they are. This is the way of Washington, D.C. right now. If it's bad news about President Trump, then all eyes on D.C. But if he's done something good, or if something good has happened under his watch, then by all means, James Comey, let's talk about your book. By all means, Stormy Daniels, let's talk about an age-old affair that the Trumps have taken care of within the bounds of their marriage and is none of our public business. Yeah, I said it. Yes, and I'm saying that within a couple of minutes of having said this is a Christian show. You don't really believe that none of the other elected officials have ever had problems, do you? Because the bar has been changed. The standard is no longer moral, upright, could be a deacon at your church. Leftists don't even want us mentioning the fact that churches exist in public. So you can't have it both ways. If you think the sex workers have a right to have a place to advertise and discuss who are dangerous clients, then you certainly don't get to put on a moral hat and talk about Stormy Daniels and some old, dried up, irrelevant encounter she had with the president. Because the rest of us don't really care about that. I care deeply that people have a relationship with the Lord. And if you want one, it's as easy as saying, I acknowledge you. I'm a sinner and I need you. I need your salvation. Father, please come into my heart. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he died on the cross for my sins, rose on the third day, and that he's seated at the right hand of the Father. And bim, bam, boom, there it is. Go find a church, get baptized, and you're in the crew. But please miss me with your double standards. There are no standards for the left, really, because a double standard is an example of the lack of standards. And so if you have triple, quadruple standards, or if you're in, somersault mode, then you don't have any standards. And that means I don't have to listen to you. So, yeah, we have it. Also, we talked about the story about the little girl being, assaulted at the Target. The same people who've brought us the genderless bathrooms and opened up all the little girls and women of America to, the perverts who all they want to do is go to Targets and molest people all day. That's the same group of people who are finding it so hard to cope with the fact that Stormy Daniels might be telling the truth about President Trump. I don't care if she's telling the truth or if she's, what does it matter? I'm sorry, I said that wrong. At this point, what difference does it make? So, you know, I'm done with that. Now, remember we were just talking about Wendy Vitter, Judge Vitter. Just to prove to you that that was a setup, I just want to make sure you can't be of any doubt that that was a setup. On CNN, just last night, they had Keith Boykin on the program, and he was talking about judicial nominee Wendy Vitter refusing to answer whether she thought the landmark 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision was correctly decided. But is that what happened? She was asked to validate or invalidate a Supreme Court decision. Later, when she was asked if it was immoral, she said it was immoral to have segregated schools. And she said it was bad public policy. He doesn't even talk about that here. So I'm looking. Let me look and see who's on this panel. Oh, yeah. Oh, they do have one conservative on here. Yeah. But does it really matter? They've got their narrative. They did this. They set this trap up. Doesn't matter that she didn't follow into it. They're using it against her because they don't want her sitting on that circuit court because she's pro-life. That's the whole thing. All right. We're going to have Richard Lim, creator of This American President podcast, and so much more when we get back after these messages. Stay right there.
Okay, so the big question for any decision you're going to make, is this actually going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, which is a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that. Does it work? Well, so did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery, and the bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered too, so why not? You can call right now, 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Mason Weaver, bringing you the truth right between their lies.
Greetings, folks. This is ClarenceMason.com with the truth between the lies. You know, recently I had a conversation with an unbeliever. At first, I did not know he was an unbeliever because he told me things about the scripture that led me to believe he read the scripture. But every time I made a comment, he would attack Christian faith by using scriptural verses taken out of content. He would continue to attack what I am believing by using my Bible against me. And finally it came out that he was not a Christian, that he had studied Christianity and rejected it. And therefore, but every argument he had wasn't from Buddha, it wasn't from Confucius, it wasn't from Allah, it was from the scriptures. And he was using scripture to fight my beliefs. So finally I asked him, why are you using my sword to fight me? You think I'm going to allow you to use my sword? If you don't believe in Christianity, why are you quoting the Bible to me? If you don't believe in the Bible, it is foolish for you to quote the Bible to me. Don't allow another warrior to use your sword against you. Don't answer every question these idiots ask you. They're not really asking a question. They're attacking your faith. Even Jesus did not answer every question because there were not really questions. There were attacks. He called that casting your pearls before swine. Leave these pigs where you find them. I cut him off. How dare you use my scripture to attack my beliefs? Use your own. Oh, I forgot. You don't have any scripture. You don't have any fulfilled prophecies because you're worshiping a dead belief. This is ClarenceMason.com with the truth between the lies.
You have been listening to Mason Weaver. Our email address is clarenceamason@clarenceamason.com. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Hey, welcome back to the show. So good to be with you today. Happy Friday to you. Hope you're enjoying it. Looking forward to the weekend. We had some fantastic weather yesterday. I don't know about you guys, but we got out and we walked and walked and walked and walked and looked around and made some landscaping plans we hope to accomplish this year on the acres. And it was such a beautiful day. I was just so happy to see some nice weather. And so I'm hoping for more, but apparently it's going to be in the 20s, true St. Louis, on Sunday. So I still have my winter coats hanging at the ready just in case. Sweaters are still folded and out and not stored away for the summer. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Richard Lim. He's the creator of This American President podcast, former White House political appointee during the Bush administration, and author and national security commentator. Hey, Richard, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Stacy. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm just wishing that it was always going to be like it was yesterday, but I'm not going to get my wish.
Yeah, I'm from California and originally from Philippines, and I'm not designed for the East Coast snow, I'll tell you that.
You guys have had a really rough go. I got to say, if I was feeling sorry for anybody, it couldn't be us in the Midwest. We did have snow, but you guys just got pummeled.
We did, but this city is pretty weak when it comes to the weather. Everything shuts down if it's an inch of snow, so don't give us too much credit.
You guys did shut down, yeah. I remember my parents were actually texting. They're like, "We're home." I'm like, "Really, guys?" It wasn't even so. But the pictures were really gorgeous. Instagram was littered with gorgeous pictures of all the snow on the branches and snow on the evergreen little rounded bushes. It was really nice.
Yeah, it was nice. It's funny. I just came back from a trip to the Philippines, and I'll tell you, going from where it's really nice and vacation spot, 90 degrees, lots of humidity, to D.C. where it's 30 degrees. Now it's nice, but when I came back, it was 30 degrees. It was like being in two different planets.
Well, I felt the same. We came back from Florida. It was in the 70s, mid 70s. And we got back here and it was like 25. I'm like, what happened? I don't understand this. It's like we're in the spring. Spring started like March 22nd. I don't know. I don't get what's going on here. What I'm hoping for is that someone will give me my global warming I was promised. Okay, let's talk some news of the day. You're in Washington, D.C. You're right in the heart of everything. I guess we have to talk for just a minute about Jim Comey's book. Did you get a review copy? Did what do you think? Or no, is it nothing? Is it a nothing burger?
Yeah, it just seems that they've been barking up the wrong tree for so long. And I thought that the timing was fascinating when you saw President Trump pardon Scooter Libby. And that really harkens back to when the Democrats were trying to get the Bush administration on something that just didn't really, they were trying to get the big fish. And I think you're seeing kind of the same thing. I think that pardon was a bit of a signal. It was a bit of kind of a message he was saying as far as protecting people who protect their bosses.
It's interesting that you're kind of seeing that like messaging within it. I thought it was interesting that he chose the same time that Comey's book was issued to do the pardon as well. I know Scooter Libby probably doesn't care what day it is. He's just glad he got pardoned. But it is a kind of, it's like a dance that the president is doing with these people who they're attacking him and he's striking back in interesting ways.
Right. Well, it's so fascinating because it's all so selective. I was reading this. It was one of those study guides for kids. They're kind of like a laminated study guide sheet that kids can buy to study for history or whatever subject. And there was one for the presidents. And you look at what it says for each president. And, for Ronald Reagan, one of the biggest things mentioned was Iran-Contra. But you look at these other presidents that have all these other, things, skeletons in their closets, the Kennedys and all that. There's nothing about that. It's so positive, and I think that really it's, you know how I study a lot of the history and everything, and it's so selective, whether it's about what's going on today or history. You know, they're only looking at, they want to influence the narrative.
You know, yeah. I mean, Iran-Contra. So President Reagan oversaw the elimination of the wall between, like, the breakup of the communists.
Right.
There's, you know, I mean, there's so much more that he
and
did.
The prosperity.
Yeah, epic.
All the prosperity that came.
Yeah, there was a lot more that he did. And it's, if you want to mention Iran-Contra, I'm actually not opposed to them mentioning it, but what about the other things that were, he had an epic presidency, if I do say so myself, and I tend to be much more critical. That's interesting. So, all right, let's then pivot over to the kind of bigger story, which was that this attorney, longtime confidant and personal attorney, business attorney for President Trump, Michael Cohen, he had his offices raided, and the offices were the same ones where President Trump's legal files were stored, meaning the attorney-client privilege was basically breached. I don't even know how they were able to get a search warrant for that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you know, I think that it's clear that, you know, this investigation will stop at nothing, you know, and I think in that sense, it could really change how these kind of situations are handled. I mean, everything's so politically motivated, and I think that, you know, it's part of a big reason why people are losing faith in our country, in the justice system. I mean, if you don't have respect for the FBI, and I think, you know, I know people that have worked there, and for many years, the FBI was an institution that was beyond reproach. But unfortunately, you're just not seeing that anymore.
Yeah, it kind of takes away I know for me growing up, the FBI was something that there was no criticism of it because all they did was these epic investigations, and they would lay out these cases against really bad people, and those people would be brought to justice by the DOJ. You know, it was just, you just knew the FBI was full of guys who they ate and they slept and they breathed, you know, investigations and taking down bad guys. Now, not so much. And I know there's still agents who, you know, that is their main reason for existing. But this problem with James Comey, he's kind of like the male version of Hillary Clinton. Hillary won't go away, and neither will James Comey.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, I think, you know, people don't know when they've worn out their welcome. And I think it's clear that you mentioned that I worked for the Bush administration. And one thing I really admire about President Bush is that you can tell he doesn't need the spotlight. He doesn't want it, you know. And I think that he made it very clear that when he left office, he wasn't going to pipe up and make life harder for his successor. You know, you wish that you would just see that more often. I mean, and we look to history and we look at the George Washingtons and these statesmen. When they knew their time was up, they left office. But some people just have an addiction to attention and to power, and we're worse off as a country.
So again, we always have, like, if I was a betting woman, I would have a little odds running on how much longer we have to put up with Hillary Clinton. But it would not be something I'd want to do with James Comey, because in some ways, to me, he's worse because to me, he's a more serious person. Like, he was the head of the FBI. I know Hillary Clinton, you know, was the head of the State Department and she was a senator and all that, but she's always been married to Bill Clinton. And to me, that's not serious. But James Comey was the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. At some point, I just, like, in the middle of the night, does he wake up and go, oh no, you know, this is what what have I done? And then kind of like slink off and, you know, respectably fade to black. But can it happen? Can that happen?
Yeah, you know, people wonder why faith in our institutions is so low, and everything's been politicized. You know, whether it's our most trusted agencies, whether it's, you know, you try to watch a movie and next thing you know, there's something preachy about it. And people wonder why there's so little faith in the media, why there's so little faith in our government. And, you know, one thing that was very concerning to me was just how politicized intelligence has become. I mean, it's so clear that, you know, throughout the Obama years, intelligence and just the way it was used to paint a rosy picture about what was going on. Obama's his actions in the Middle East and things like that. And people wonder, the people in office wonder why trust is so low. Well, look in the mirror.
I mean, and then once you've looked in the mirror, look again, because it's just the roughest it's ever been. Let's talk a little bit about, because you do comment on national security. I wanted to get your take on what's going on in Syria with the latest round of chemical attacks against the innocent civilians and Russia kind of, posturing and trying to influence what we're going to do. Jim Mattis has come out with some serious strategy, and he sounds like it's not softball, it's not cotton balls, it's hard, fisted reactions to what they're doing over there. What do you think Russia's really going to do?
Well, that's a great question. I first of all, I think that one of the best documents that's come out of the Trump administration has been the national security strategy. Most of the time it's just a fluffy document that people don't really care about. But this one, I think it has Secretary Mattis's fingerprints all over it, and it essentially reverses Obama's focus on things like climate change, as our biggest national security threat, as if, the Pentagon, that's its number one responsibility. And it focuses on power politics. And, quite frankly, I think that the president, he promised to put America first. That was his goal. I think that you can sum his foreign policy up. Reagan's was peace through strength. I think you can say Trump's is America first. And I think that he's showing a really clear, he's drawing a clear line. One thing I think the president also understands is that he understands that unpredictability is leverage. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if, to an extent, Russia begins to see the United States in a different light. They see that America draws clear lines in the sand, which it didn't in the previous administration, and they see that, we will act when it is necessary. And so it's a dangerous situation, but I think that you see the president handling the leverage that he has much better than the previous president.
And so I agree. I think in a lot of ways, it's really as simple as a changing of the guard with President Trump. He is so different when it comes to responding to any kind of threat, whether it's domestic or whether it's something in the realm of politics. But specifically on the foreign policy front, he's just been so much stronger and so much more aggressive than President Obama was. Really, I think a lot of the world leaders are just, they kind of are trying to recalculate the odds, and they're not in their favor.
Sure. Well, even President Obama said that when he talked about our allies, whether it's NATO or any of our other allies, he said that essentially a lot of them are freeloading off of our nuclear umbrella, off of our protection, but nothing came out of that. I think what you're seeing with this administration is a change because, we have cards to play, and many of our allies aren't pulling their weight as far as contributing to the defense posture of NATO. And I think that when you see a president that's willing to leverage that and call them out and, really show that there's consequences to not putting in, an effort for the team, then they're going to start thinking differently. They're going to calculate differently. And quite frankly, I think that's better for everybody. I think it's better for countries to take up, responsibility for their own defense. And it's good for us as well.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give you a chance to tell everybody where to go to listen to the your This American President podcast and website and all that stuff.
Yes. Yep. So we have a website, www.thisamericanpresident.com. We are also on iTunes, so if you just look up This American President. We just released an episode on James Polk, our 11th president, and it talks about the Mexican-American War. Very fascinating. It's kind of something that's sandwiched between, the Jackson Age and the Civil War, so it's a bit overlooked, but it's such an important moment in American history.
Absolutely. And we love your insights on the president's. It's been always so fascinating to talk to you about those things and to talk to you today about all of the news of the day. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for coming on. Richard Lim, creator of This American President podcast, former White House political appointee during the Bush administration, author, national security commentator. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. All right. So we just moving through the show. I want to give you guys a chance to call in the last segment. We are going to be taking some calls. If you feel like chatting, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. I want to say hi to the people on Periscope. If you're watching the show on Periscope, fantastic. We've upgraded our equipment. Huge thanks to first of all, to our producer of Stacy on the Right. It's Devin. Thank you so much for your hard work on that. And then all of the guys in the engineering team over at AFA. Man, it was a little bit like, it was an adventure. We all took out and we had our little knapsacks and we went on an adventure of upgrading the equipment, and it actually worked. And so huge thanks to my husband, who contributed a tad of his expertise in moving cords and reconnecting things and knowing what all the things are called. And of course, the provider, who I won't mention on the air, but we have a really great provider for our services here that connect this little studio at my house up to the big mama studio or papa studio, whichever one you think it is, down in Tupelo at American Family and Urban Family Talk. So really excited about that. So we're on YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope right now, all at the same time. So grateful for that. Thank you so much, everybody who made that happen and continues to make that happen for the show. You can call in 866-963-2037. And when we get back, we're going to hear Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, talking about the Syria strategy. This is a part of the Trump doctrine. This is the continuation of the development of the new strength that is America's foreign policy. And, like it or not, that's what the president is doing. I like it. I think it's fantastic to have someone who actually puts the fear of something or other into our enemies. That's the way it's supposed to be. All right, when we get back, we'll talk about that. We'll hear that audio, and I'll take your calls. See you in a minute.
This week during our family worship time together, when we turned to the scripture, I was sharing with my family, and we were discussing the scripture that says, do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. And I was explaining the whole caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly process. My son said, he's 6 years old, Daddy, I get it. We're like the caterpillars. God provides the cocoon, and God's desire all along is, even though we're in caterpillar form, is for us to become butterflies. And then look what he said. But when we get into trouble, Daddy? When we try to move from caterpillar to butterfly and we skip over God. And when you try to skip over God, you think you have your wings, but you fall flat.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
And I had to tell you, I had to fight back tears in the moment because I'm saying, oh, Lord, he's getting this.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless his truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Yo, what up, Sid?
Yo, what's up, Mike? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, bro. Just left the club, the usual.
The club? Man, them clubs don't love back, man. You ain't learned yet. You better slow down, dude.
Ah, come on, Sid. You remember those days? We used to turn up together, man.
Used to, brother. I'm on something much different.
Like what, though? I mean, that Jesus music you be rapping about, or beatboxing, or whatever you be doing.
I'm saying, though, that's how I worship. God gave me rap, so I give it back.
Why, though? Gospel rap is boring, man.
Boring? There's nothing boring about the ransom that ransomed me with himself. Took me off the shelf to transform me into my best. Surrounding me with those of like minds. He drops bombs, some of which is found on urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
On Syria, sir, both the last administration and this one made very clear that our role in Syria is the defeat of ISIS. We are not going to engage in the civil war itself. Now, you can look back to a year ago when we did fire missiles into Syria unrelated to ISIS, and that was, of course, the use of chemical weapons. And some things are simply inexcusable, beyond the pale, and in the worst interest of not just the Chemical Weapons Convention, but of civilization itself. And so the recognition of that means at times you're going to see contrary impulses. You saw President Obama try to deal with those chemical weapons when he was in and enlisting the Russians, who now it shows were complicit in Syria retaining those weapons, Assad retaining them. And the only reason Assad is still in power is because of the Russians' regrettable vetoes in the UN and the Russian and Iranian military.
Wow. So you hear Mattis talking about the Syria strategy, describing the difficulties that are inherent to the situation because of Russia, who they're our ally, but in this instance, they behave as if they are our foe. And so no matter what we try to do to make the situation better, Russia gets in between the solution and our direction, and they stymie it. I think it's kind of sad because the result of their actions is that innocent people have been gassed and you know they've been killed, children, and you would think that no matter what their aims are there, that would somehow weigh upon them, but apparently it does not. And I don't mean the Russian people, I mean their leader, Putin. And so, you know, if you look at the actions that the president has taken, expelling the diplomats because of the horrible attack that happened in London, in Great Britain, where you've got this guy who's suspected of being a defector and the Russians kill him on British soil. And then we expel 60 diplomats from, across the country here in the U.S. That's not the actions of someone who colluded to get elected to the presidency of the United States. But I don't know if you guys have noticed, no one's talking about that anymore. No one on the left is talking about collusion anymore. They're holding their breath and rubbing their knobby little fingers together, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We got him on Stormy Daniels. It's just like Bill Clinton, only this time it's good. That's what they're waiting for, because they don't have the Russia collusion. They don't have obstruction of justice. So they're waiting on something with Stormy Daniels, which is why the expansion of this probe into basically anything that you can find, it's basically made it almost like Mueller can't stop until he finds something. And we all know how that works. So, so we've got Mattis also talking about what he wants to do about ISIS, which is also a major, like they've crushed ISIS in Syria, but of course it's not completely dead. And so he goes on to describe that a little bit. It's number 6.
So how do we deal with this very complex situation? First of all, we are committed to ending that war through the Geneva process and the UN orchestrated effort. It has been unfulfilled because, again, Russia has continually blocked the efforts. But that doesn't mean we give up. We work with the international community, the United Nations, to get the Geneva process underway and make certain that we don't allow this war to go on. I've seen refugees from Asia to Europe, Kosovo to Africa. I've never seen refugees as traumatized as coming out of Syria. It's got to end, and our strategy remains the same as a year ago. It is to drive this to a UN-brokered peace, but at the same time keep our foot on the neck of ISIS until we suffocate it.
All right. How much more direct can you be? I think that's exactly what we need to hear. Instead of having a almost a mealy mouth, wishy-washy, we'll see what we can do. He comes out and says they're going to put the foot of the American boot on ISIS's neck and leave it there until they've got what they want. Fantastic. I like it. So here's some news that I don't even know what to say. I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. This is someone that I've actually been on television with before, Simone Sanders. Remember, she was the press secretary for Bernie Sanders. She's a CNN analyst, and apparently she lost her cookies at the airport and she was detained. So she was at LaGuardia. She's 28 years old. She was in line at the security checkpoint. The TSA agent asked her to step out of line, and she started cursing, and, she started losing her stuffing. Now, Sanders has actually had issues at airports in the past. American Airlines called the police on Sanders last year after she was trying to check her luggage minutes before a flight from Los Angeles. She said she didn't want to pay full price for a new ticket, despite being a frequent flyer of the airline. So the customer service representatives called the authorities. And after it was resolved, she said she didn't understand why the airline called the police. Anyway, yeah. So that's a CNN analyst that's having difficulties at the airport. I can feel your pain sometimes when you're there. It's just like so out of control, but keep your calm. That's what you have to do. So now I want to pivot over to FBI Director Andrew McCabe. So remember, he was there and he was just let go. He committed 3 violations of the Bureau's ethics code. And when he was let go, the left started screaming, another firing. President Trump doesn't like McCabe because McCabe's investigating him and he's going to make sure he goes down. That wasn't it at all. This was actually recommended by the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, and they included in the violations lack of candor under oath, lack of candor when not under oath, and the improper disclosure of non-public information to the media about the FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Now, isn't it kind of ironic that the Clinton family had trouble with email storage and maintaining the safety of classified information, and then their buddy McCabe also had the same kind of problems? He couldn't be honest whether he was under oath or not, and he leaked stuff. So the violations actually came from McCabe's response to an October 2016 Wall Street Journal report about sizable campaign donations from Democrats to McCabe's wife, Jill, during her campaign for the Virginia State Senate. Ooh. So the investigation found that McCabe instructed FBI lawyer Lisa Page and FBI Public Affairs Chief Michael Corton to work with the Journal's reporter to set the record straight. So according to the source, McCabe's lack of candor about the contact with the Journal reporter led to his firing. So he basically lied about whether or not he'd spoken to the reporter. And, that's just not tolerated at the FBI. Actually, McCabe's firing indicates that for all of the different things we've said we don't like about stuff that's going on there, that they're trying to clean it up. That's what it looks like to me anyway. So yeah, that was important news. So they're calling today Comey the 13th. I think that's cute for marketing, but it's not cool that that's what they've got going on. This whole idea that Comey can get out and people act like he has credibility. He does not. So, also, speaking of leaks, we've got this Apple memo. 12 employees were arrested last year for leaking secrets. So, this is at fastcompany.com. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman reports on a memo recently sent to all Apple employees stating that 29 Apple people were caught leaking secrets about planned products last year. 12 of them were arrested. 12 of them were arrested. These people not only lose their jobs, they can face extreme difficulty in finding employment elsewhere, according to product marketing exec Greg Joswiak in the memo. So the memo describes the stark terms surrounding the implication for employees who leak information about the new products that are coming out, and then afterwards if they get caught. The main facts about the iPhone X and the Apple Watch 3 have been leaked to the media before the splashy launch event, leaving Apple executives to go through the motions of delivering big surprises from the stage. Apple says leaked information can depress sales of existing product models, give competitors more time to respond to features that are coming in future models, and that they want their chance to tell the customers why a product is great, not have it done poorly by someone else, namely one of the people that their employees had leaked to. So it's kind of interesting that they're having this publicly. Basically, it's like a shot across the bow. If you work here and you leak, we're going to get you. I don't know if I can blame them for that. If you work there and you know it's a secret and you tell it anyway, I guess you're putting yourself up for whatever you signed up for. Oh, so we got a caller. Let's talk to Jose in California. Thanks for calling the show.
Hi, Stacy. How are you? I'm calling you from the People's Republic of California, from East Los Angeles, and you do have a fan base out here.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
I just want to talk to you about Comey. Comey, what he did, he set a precedent that any outgoing administration or any opposite party could basically conduct opposition research and then use that opposition research to engage a FISA court filing. And that is a dangerous precedent that Comey has now instituted in the FBI and the Justice Department. And it's basically going to be replicated over and over again. And this is a precedent that has been set. And I wonder if people realize that Hillary Clinton, paid for this golden showers memo. Even though it was a Republican researcher, Clinton actually paid and solidified its, induction into the Justice Department to be used in the FISA court. And that has to be, that's a criminal offense, and I don't see Comey actually talking about that at all.
Well, it is. I wish that we had the assurance that when people do things wrong, it doesn't matter what political party they're from, they would get prosecuted, but we don't have that assurance. In fact, we pretty much have a guarantee of the opposite. They're going after President Trump for goodness knows what. They don't have the collusion. They don't have obstruction. But with Hillary Clinton, where they clearly had her dead to rights on a bunch of stuff, she's walking around free. McCabe was fired for lying, and Comey was fired, but instead of him being vilified, he's being lifted up as if he's some kind of hero, when he himself, there has to be some rule he broke in refusing to forward the accurate recommendation to the Department of Justice.
That's the thing, that's the narrative that we got to let out to the people, is a double standard or sometimes a triple standard that they have when it comes to the Justice Department. And Mr. Magoo is not doing anything to help clear that up in the Justice Department. I'm very disappointed in Sessions, and I used to have respect for him. I really don't have any respect for him whatsoever, because he's allowing this witch hunt to basically go unabated. And, an obstruction of justice, so-called charge, still needs 2/3 of Congress to get through. And the Democrats are not going to get 2/3 regardless what happens in these 2-year elections. The next election is this year. And I doubt them getting it on the next election. It's a very high bar to Democrats to win 2/3 of the Senate and 2/3 of the Congress.
Yeah,
That's what they're going to have to do in order to conduct a winning impeachment charge against Trump. So it's basically just a witch hunt. It's just a way of stagnating his presidency, and they're basically trying to make sure that he doesn't win his reelection. And
yeah, I agree. And we have like less than a minute left, and I wanted to get a chance to say thank you so much, Jose, for calling the show today. I hope you call back again. Thanks for tuning out of the People's Republic of California, which I sincerely hope can be turned around and returned to its former glory, breadbasket of the country, really beautiful state. And I really appreciate your listening to the show and sharing it and all that. So it's Friday, and I want to give you guys a teensy little preview for next week. Monday, we have Cassie Smedel. She's a National Press Secretary and spokesperson for the RNC. You know, we love our RNC guests. They give us such great information. And I want you to look out for me. I'm going to be doing a lot of radio and media for the two press releases that we just issued. One is that we've been picked up by Talk America Radio. So 3 stations in Georgia and Florida will be added to the Stacey on the Right Show Nation. And I'm really happy about that. It's a blessing from God. And we're also talking about the president's new push for welfare reform. That is the agenda, and we want to talk about it. So we'll be discussing that a little bit more here on the show on Monday. God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you then.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily